This training today will hopefully give you an overview of phonics and reading at Highfield Ely. We hope that this will also give you a clear idea of what we are doing across the school and across the different pathways. We are going to cover a few different things. First of all, we're going to look in more depth at what is reading, and we're going to look at the clues of the three sources of information. We'll then look a bit at comprehension, then we'll move on to phonics and what we are doing here at Highfield Ely, and then lastly we're going to look at the reading records. So Scholastic have defined reading as this. To read a book, your child needs to sound out the words, recognise common ones like the, understand what the text means, and read fast enough to make sense of the story. When we start to break this down, we realise that we're being asked to do a variety of different things. So firstly, to read a book, your child needs to be able to sound out words. This here is the phonics. We need to recognise common words like the. So here we've got our sight vocabulary and those words that we'll never be able to sound out. Understand what the text means. So here's your comprehension. And read fast enough to make sense of the story. So that's your fluency. When our pupils are reading, we're actually asking them to do some problem solving. There are three sources of information that we're asking them to use. The first is meaning. It should make sense. It should match the pictures. If a pupil makes an error, we could ask them, look at the picture. Does that make sense? The next is structure. It should sound right, and when we read it, it should be able to be said like that in our language. So for instance, we could prompt them with, the butterfly landed the flower. Does that sound right? The last is visual. Does that look right? They may use letter shapes as a clue, and they may also apply phonics. If they do read a wrong word for visual, we could say, does that look right? In an ideal world, the pupils would be working where the star is on this picture. However, we know that our pupils are going to be working more in one area than another. They may be relying on pictures to help them with working out what the sentence says, and that's okay as a clue to use a picture. We shouldn't be covering up the pictures. They may begin a sentence and put in words that they think belong in it. Some may guess at words by looking at the letter shapes. That's okay, but we need to be helping them to develop their skills in the other parts. The next thing we're asking them to do is to understand text. We know that our pupils will often bark at the text. They can read fluently, but they have no idea what they have read. So we focus on two strands of comprehension. The first is AF2 and the second is AF3. AF2 is your literal questions, where you are asking them to seek, find and understand, and to refer back to the text. These could be your questions like, what are they doing on the boat? Or, what was the weather like in that story? These are the questions where they will find the answer written for them in the text. The next is your AF3 questions, where we're asking people to deduct or infer, to read between the lines and interpret, to put yourself in their shoes and refer back to the text to help with this. So it could be a question like, how do you think that character was feeling at this point of the story? If you ever need examples of the different questions, look in the back of your class reading folder and there are examples of both AF2 and AF3 questions. So we're going to have a practice ourselves at looking at some different questions. So I've got a piece of text here. It says, as the afternoon light started to fade, the cow stopped eating grass. stood instead with its head over the gate and gazed expectantly down the lane. So here are some questions we could ask about this piece of text. Number 1, what 3 things did the cow do? Number 2, what time of day was it? Number 3, where was the cow? Number 4, how do you think the cow might have been feeling? Number 5, what do you think the cow was expecting? 6, how light was it? Have a couple of minutes just to think about these questions. Which are the easiest to answer? Are they the AF2 questions where the answers are in the text for us? Or the AF3 questions where we are asking people to use their own experiences to help them work out the answer? Which out of these questions do you think our pupils would find it harder to answer? So the skills we're asking pupils to develop are a good working memory, active reading skills to make sense of text, ability to monitor comprehension and self-correct errors, a wide background knowledge, and a rich vocabulary. But how does a pupil's additional needs affect these points? Some of these skills might be more useful when working with particular text types. For instance, prediction might be a useful skill with fiction, and summarising may be a useful skill when working with non-fiction. Pupils will need to be actively taught these skills, and it will require modelling by ourselves. For example, if I want a pupil to predict the next event in a story, I might say something along these lines. I think the troll might eat the middle-sized billy goat because he let the little one go. Then, as the pupil reads on, ask them to predict what the troll will do next. The next part of reading that we are going to look at is phonics. So phonics is knowing the relationship between the sounds of spoken language and the letters of written language, and this is essential for reading. I always remember phonics as the beginning part of the word is like phone, and on a phone we listen. So phonics is the sounds, it's what we're listening for, it's the sounds that different letters make. Some of the early milestones that we are going to be working towards are understanding that the order of letters in a written word represents the order of sounds in a spoken word, and vice versa. Knowing the sounds that letters make. Blending letter sounds together to make a word. M-at makes mat for reading. And this term, blending, is one that's really good when we're writing our reading record sheets. Sounding out words, segmenting for writing and spelling. Now these skills are going to be skills that we're working on for quite a while with our pupils, and they may not get to the point where they are able to master all, and that's okay, but these are the ones we are focusing on. When we are looking at phonics for Highfield, we have 2 main approaches we're using. We're using storytime phonics and letters and sounds. We're using letters and sounds for yellow and teaching this as a discrete topic, and then storytime phonics in the green is also being taught as a discrete lesson. In blue, we will be using it if relevant. So Letters and Sounds is a phonics resource programme which was published by the Department for Education in 2007. And although it's an older strategy, it is really good. It aims to help children build up speaking and listening skills, as well as preparing them to learn how to read. It is done by developing knowledge in phonics by giving a programme for teaching phonics skills. So linked to letters and sounds is Storytime Phonics. And Storytime Phonics is our new approach that we have brought in the past year. And it is based upon letters and sounds. So if pupils move through different pathways, it will all be very similar, just taught in a slightly different way. Storytime Phonics is a book per sound. Within a set of 6, the order may be a bit different for each class. So some class may do it as SAPIN, some might do it as TSANIP, but it's okay because they all learn the same set of 6. A focus on a sound a week, and boxes are kept where the book boxes currently are. They'll be taught as a minimum of 3 sessions a week. In this week, there must be all aspects of the plan that's already there, including the writing. We review the previous sounds and words every session. We teach the correct articulation of sounds and clear modelling of writing, and we're focusing on the non-cursive writing, that's your non-joined up writing. We use the book as the heart of the lessons that week. So although phonics should be the main driver of the lesson, we do recognise and will reflect in some of the session that some of our learners need a whole word approach. So we've included communicating print symbols of key vocabulary for each, and they've been added to the box to support this. So looking now in a bit of depth about the different phases, it tends to be terminology that people use, and it's not always clear what's included in the different phases. So phase 1 is your really early phonics skills. Our green and blue pathways, they are covering phase 1 phonics most of the time all the way through the week. So in phase 1 phonics, children are taught about environmental sounds, instrumental sounds, body percussion, so it could be clapping, stamping, rhythm and rhyme, alliteration, voice sounds, oral blending and segmenting, so hearing that d, o, g makes dog. So if you think about a blue pathway class in particular, and think about what the type of lessons they do throughout a day, you'll find that throughout those lessons, those kind of skills are being covered all the time. Some other activities could include listening walks, playing and identifying instruments, action songs, learning rhymes and playing games like I Spy. This phase is intended to develop pupils' listening, vocabulary and speaking skills. Phase 2 is the phase that I think most people will probably be familiar with if they look at this mat. Children begin to learn sounds that letters make, the phonemes. There are 44 sounds in all. Some are made with 2 letters, but in phase 2, pupils focus on learning the 19 most common single letter sounds. We normally start with the most commonly used phonemes, which is s, a, t, p, I, n. By the end of phase 2, pupils should be able to read some vowel consonant and consonant vowel consonant words and to spell them out. They also will be learning some high frequency tricky words like the and go. The next phase is phase 3. This introduces pupils to the remaining more difficult and less commonly used phonemes. There are around 25 of these, depending on which scheme is used. Mainly made up of 2 letters such as ch, r, ow, e. We need these sounds to be able to read and form useful words. Alongside this, we teach pupils to recognise more tricky words, including me, was, my, you and they. They'll learn the names of the letters as well as the sounds they make. Activities might include learning mnemonics for tricky words, practicing writing letters on mini whiteboards, using word cards and singing songs like the alphabet song. Phase 4. By now we would hope that our pupils would be more confident with each phoneme. And now on we are teaching about consolidating and refining knowledge, introducing more spelling patterns and tricky words, and increasing vocabulary. So some of the things we'll be learning in Phase 4 are reading and spelling CVCC words, reading and spelling high frequency words, reading and writing sentences, learn some more tricky words including have, like, some, little. Our pupils should now be blending confidently to work out new words, and they should be starting to be able to read words straight off rather than sounding them out. They should also be able to write every letter mostly correctly. Phase 5. This is where we start to introduce alternative spellings for sounds, like I, spelt I-G-H. Pupils will master these in reading first, and as fluency develops, we begin to see them using them correctly in spellings. Until this point, and if you've got a child yourself who is in mainstream school with writing, you'll notice that their writing is very phonetic and the words do not look correct until they get to around this stage. Pupils will learn new graphemes, which is the different ways of spelling each sound, and alternative pronunciations for these. For example, they might learn that the grapheme OW makes a different sound in snow and cow. They should become quicker at blending and start to do it silently. They will learn about split digraphs, which some people know as the magic E, such as the A-E in name. They'll start to hopefully choose the right graphemes when spelling, and will learn more tricky words including people, water and friend. Phase 6. This is the phase that doesn't tend to get taught discreetly like the rest. So that by the end of Phase 6, we aim that pupils will become fluent readers and accurate spellers. They should be able to read hundreds of words using one of the 3 strategies: reading them automatically, decoding them quickly and silently, and decoding them aloud. Children should also now be spelling most words accurately. This is known as encoding, although most of the time this usually lags behind the reading. They also start to learn other things such as your prefixes and your suffixes, the past tense, memory strategies for high frequency or topic words, proofreading, how to use a dictionary, where to put the apostrophe in words like I'm, and spelling rules. So the whole aim of phonics teaching is not just to learn the sounds, but to use them as a tool for reading and spelling. Everything leads on to an independent reading and writing. So I'm just going to show you a couple of tools you can use when supporting our pupils with reading or writing. The first is a phoneme frame, and this is a rectangular grid with several squares side by side. It is used for reading and writing simple words in early phonics. They are used for splitting up the phonemes, which are the sounds of words, one phoneme per box. For example, the word dog would be written D-O-G, with one phoneme per 3 boxes. If we have a pupil who's learning to spell and they want to spell this word sat here, they might be able to identify the S and the T as often we find pupils find the initial letter and the final letter the easiest. We can then support them to put in the middle letter. I find sometimes that if you use tactile objects like rocks, that pupils can be more engaged with trying to spell, but use it how you feel works for your pupils. Something that's worth mentioning now is a GPC, which is short for grapheme phoneme correspondence. So grapheme is the way that the word is written or the sound is written. So I remember it as grapheme is like a graphite pencil, so it's how it's written. So knowing a GPC means being able to match a phoneme sound to a grapheme, the written representation, and vice versa. This will help us when we're using our phoneme frames. When writing this word spoon using a phoneme frame, we would only have a phoneme frame with 4 boxes, even though it's got 5 letters. This is because the oo sound will just be in one box together. So although as letters we know it's an o and an o, when we're making the phoneme sound, we write it as a oo. The other tool that we could use to help us are sound buttons. So these are circles or spots that can be written underneath the sound to support reading. When you touch the sound button, you then practice saying the sound aloud. So tip would be t, I, p. Then we've got p, I, t. When we move on to our digraphs and trigraphs, we would draw a line. So play would be p, l, a. You could use counters as buttons, so I find the tiddlywink counters work quite well for this, and slide them up as you say each sound, and you can speed up until the word is blended together. So to begin with, your t, I, p might be very separate sounds, but then you can slowly speed it up until it becomes really clear what the word is. T, I, p. Lastly, I just want to do a quick overview of the reading records. So here is a picture of what they look like. We've got the book bands across the top, which we circle which book band the pupil is on. We're then identifying what it is we would like them to be working on. If it's phonics, in your reading packs you could have a phonics mat to be able to refer back to for the pupils. If it's comprehension, we could have copies of the example comprehension questions from the reading folders in their folders. I find sometimes when I'm reading with the pupils, I can't think of what to ask them around AF2 or AF3, so sometimes those question sheets are a bit of a nice prompt just to give me some ideas of what I could be asking. There's EHCP target space, so if they've got an EHCP target that's relevant to reading, you can put this in here and then we know that that's what they're focusing on. Got a space for their name, and then we've got the space for the comments. When we're writing the comments, we really want the comments to be useful. We want this sheet of paper to be a really useful working document, so as teachers we can look back at them and see what progress is being made, where their next steps could be, and what they're struggling with. So it's really useful if you write comments on there such as really struggled to segment the word cat. Then I would know that that's actually where they need to have some extra work done around. It could be that you put they're doing really well with answering AF2 questions, but struggle to answer the question about what this child did last Tuesday. And then we know what kind of things they're really struggling with. We know with phonics that there's quite a lot of terminology and it can get quite confusing. I've put in here a glossary of terms, which I can send round as well if useful for people, which just has the different terms that may be used and what it means. I can never remember all of them. I often have to refer back to the glossary of terms, and it is really tricky to remember them all, so this might be quite useful to have a copy somewhere. Hopefully this PowerPoint has been useful to you all today. If you've got any questions or want any support around any of the different phases or what it would look like for your class, please come and speak to me, please ask, we can work it out together, and it'd be great to start sharing some ideas of activities around the different phases. Thank you.